Welcome to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, so we're here again with the peas. Now I've just emptied all of these sort of guttering sections out, and I've found, I don't know, probably half a dozen sort of little peas, and there's some here just off screen that have actually developed into plants. So in all honesty, I think the first time round it didn't really help that the fact that we had that sort of cold snap of weather, and basically the seeds haven't germinated. The peas that I have found in there were basically rotten, so I think probably combination of me watering them and then it not getting hot enough for them to dry out has caused them to rot. So this is one of the dangers you run, obviously, when you've got an unheated greenhouse, and you know, when you're sort of at the mercy of the elements. But what I'm going to do the second time now is these peas I've had soaking all night. As you can see, they're in some water at the minute, so I put those in the water last night. And these peas are Hurst green shaft peas from Sutton's. So there's the packet. It's like a double-sized packet, and in here there's about how many peas are there? Around 300 peas, and so as I say, I've had them soaking, so you can see they've now sort of plumped up. So all I'm going to do now is just quickly lose the water out of there. So I can actually sort of handle the peas. Now I'm going to plant these in exactly the same way as I did before. So there are the peas now, without the water. And what I've done now is I've just got, these are actually different pieces of guttering, to be honest with you, because the other one was quite long, and what I want to do now is put these on the surface, because it's not going to be too long before I start to put the tomatoes out in the greenhouse. So I've bobbed in the ones that have actually grown in this bit here, and all I'm going to be doing now is just bobbing in the peas, sort of spacing them around sort of 2 to 3 inches apart like that, down the guttering. Hopefully I'll have enough here, if not I'll put another piece in as well. And I'm going to put these up on the surface. So I'm basically, peas, you want to plant them around sort of 1/2 inch, 2 centimetres deep. When you're putting them in the guttering like this, you know, I normally put sort of 2 rows about sort of 2 or 3 inches apart like that. And obviously now that I've soaked these, hopefully they'll sort of germinate a bit better. So I have soaked peas in the past, but I just want to say a quick thank you to Nigel from Muddy Boots and Ken Fuller, who suggested to do this. Now, they always soak their peas, and they said they've had really good germination this year. I think it's possibly due to the weather, but the reason I'm planting these now is I've been waiting to see what the weather's going to be like, and next week we're promised 20 degrees all week, weather-wise. So I think this is a good time to put the next batch in. These are a little bit further apart here, so I'll just put a few more in at the end. Where the other peas are, I'm just going to bob a few more in around the plants willy-nilly. So I'll put these in. As soon as I've put all these in like this, I'll just quickly show you one of them, so you can see. But the reason I do them in drain pipes is you can grow them in drain pipes in the greenhouse like this, and then basically all you need to do is when you put them outside, which I'll show you as soon as I've got these going, is basically you make a little drill in the ground, just a little bit bigger than the guttering, and you know, so about sort of 3 inches deep, 3 or 4 inches deep, and about sort of 5 inches wide. And then what you do is you water these, give them a really good watering so they're absolutely soaking wet. And then what you'll find is if you tip one end up, they'll just slide into the ground, and then basically you're not disturbing the roots or anything. And then what I tend to do is just bury them slightly deeper than they were in here, and you know, then that's your peas off to a good start. So all being well, these will germinate and we'll be away. So as I say, the first the first batch really I think was down to me perhaps watering them slightly too much and the cold weather. But all I'm going to do now is basically just put on top of those around sort of 2 centimetres of compost, keeping it reasonably loose. Obviously when I water them it'll sort of pack it all down, but just do that. Then put these in a obviously warm position in your greenhouse, or as warm as you can get it anyway. What I tend to do is, because I haven't got any sort of end caps on, which is important because obviously you want the water to drain, what I tend to do is just go to about sort of 2 or 3 inches before the end, because what you can find is the earth kind of, or the compost kind of washes off the end. So I'll just finish these off. I'm just going to put a bit more earth on top of these. And to be honest with you, I've used the same compost as the first lot, to be honest with you, you know, just to call me tight if you like, but I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with the compost, nothing's grown in it yet, so all the nutrients will still be there. And save opening another bag, I thought I'd just use it again. So there's no sort of, no mould or anything like that on it, so I've just got to do that bottom bit. So I'll carry on doing this now. There's a bit of a weed there. And I'll show you when I've finished. Okay, so there's the finished piece. So what I've done is I've just, I actually ended up putting a 4th one in. So there's basically 4 there, hopefully they'll germinate. And I'll show you how they're getting on in the next couple of weeks. So I'll just give you a quick update on what's going on with the trees. I've had to dig out these 2 tubs of sort of rock and stuff like that. As you can see, that's the hole. It's about a metre or so deep, possibly a little bit deeper. And I've been doing it with this, which is an SDS drill. I bought this about 10 years ago. Well worth buying if you ever see one of these in the sale, which is what this was when I bought it. I only paid about £30 for it, and it's just gone on and on and on and on. You can connect chisels to it, drills, all sorts of stuff. So what I've been doing is sort of drilling through the rock and then chiseling it all out and obviously filling the tub. So what I'll do now, I've dug it down, I've gone down basically into the subsoil. There is still a few rocks down there, but you know the roots will be able to get through there. I've chiselled down about another foot or 2 after the bottom of this hole, so I've gone down, possibly going on for 2 metres. So I know now the roots of the trees will be able to get through. Obviously all of the rock was kind of this layer here, this lighter layer. So what I'll do now is I'll fill this up with good quality topsoil and I'll be planting the trees. Okay, so finally we're ready to do the wormery. The worms have turned up today, and I never thought I'd be excited about worms turning up, but they basically turned up in one of these little plastic containers. And I've bought these over the internet, so these were basically posted through to me. And in here is a number of worms. There's quite a few sort of baby ones that I've seen go around the outside, but as you can see, they're the actual worms, and they're basically the red brandling worms which I've spoken about before. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is show you how to basically build your wormery and get it all ready. So a few weeks ago you saw me make this box, and basically all this is a black plastic box, and what I've done is I've fitted this sort of bit of plumbing on here, and what I'll do is I'll put a link to the other video where you saw me making this anyway if you haven't seen that before. But basically what I've got is a tank connection at the top with just a length of 50mm pipe, and then I've got basically an isolation valve, or basically a tap. And then on the bottom here what I've done is I've soldered 2 compression joints together, a 22mm and a 50mm, and what this actually enables you to do is to screw onto the bottom. Just grab hold of the bottle. As you can see, what I can do is then screw onto the bottom a normal sort of pop bottle, and so what I can do is then keep it like that, open the tap, and then all of the liquid fertiliser coming from the wormery will then come down this pipe and into this bottle, and obviously I can see how much I've got, and then when the bottle's full I can just turn the tap off, take this bottle off, put another bottle on, and sort of carry on that way. So that's basically what the sort of the wormery box is. In addition to that, what I've got made over the last couple of weeks, which is also in that episode, is the lid. Now all I've done with the lid is basically just got some pallet wood, and with a couple of strips underneath just to hold it all together, and that will sit on top of the box like that, just to keep basically just to keep the sun off the worms if it's if it's outside or if it's in the greenhouse, because the worms like to have it dark. However, they like to be able to breathe. And the other thing that this will do actually as well is stop too much evaporation, because basically you don't want the worms to get dry. So that's basically the box. And as I say, all it is just a black plastic box with a bit of plumbing on the bottom, with a wooden lid. Now, in addition to that, to make your wormery, what you need are effectively 4 main things. The first thing you need is to put like a sort of mesh at the bottom, and all this really does is stop any of the gravel, which is the next bit, going down inside the plumbing. So all I've got is a bit of this stuff, and this is basically the carrot fly net, and it's just a really piece of fine sort of nylon net. Do use nylon obviously, because it's going to be basically wet all the time. If you use anything that's sort of cotton or anything like that, obviously it'll rot. So you could potentially put a towel in there if you haven't got any of this, but obviously with a towel over time it will sort of rot and sort of decay. But this is the ideal stuff to use. It's a really fine mesh, about 1mm or something like that. And what I've done is I've cut 2 pieces of this. One's going to go at the bottom. I'll show you all this in a minute. One's going to go at the bottom of the box. Then I'm going to put a layer of gravel. And basically what the gravel is just, I've just washed this, and this is the, I don't know if you can see that, but it's basically sort of 10 mil gravel, and that's I bought this from a hardware shop, and it cost about £1, to be honest with you. I bought a sort of 25 kilo bag of that, and it cost £1. So basically what you need to do is start to load it. So the first thing I'll do is put this mesh down, then I'll fill the bottom of the box with the gravel. Now what this does is it forms like a reservoir, so if I ever turn that tap off, and obviously all the juices that comes from the worm, which is the fertiliser that you're after, that'll start to fill up sort of the bottom of the box. Basically the gravel's there to stop the worms from kind of drowning, so so there's some somewhere for the water to go. As soon as I've done that, so basically the mesh, then there's going to be kind of about that much gravel. I'm going to put another mesh on top of there. Now the second mesh is basically to stop, it's exactly the same stuff, is to stop the worms going into the gravel. If the gravel's dry, you want the worms to stay at the top. So that second bit of mesh is going to keep the worms in the sort of the sort of the vegetable matter above that. As soon as the second net's gone on, then what I'm going to do is put some just absolutely bog standard straw. Now what I've got this straw, it's quite heavy, but basically what I've got it soaking in one of these trucks, and so all this is basically wet straw. And what I'm going to do is put around about a 6-inch layer of that at the bottom, and what that will do is obviously the worms will also compost that as well, and that's going to be putting some carbon matter into your compost. But basically all that does is just basically keeps the worms moist and all the rest of it, which is exactly the kind of environment that you want. Then on top of the straw, then I'm just going to put some compost. And so all I've got here are basically sort of kitchen scraps. I've got some potatoes, some parsley, some carrot peelings. I've got some spinach stalks, and all that's good. There's some carrot, all sorts of bits and bobs in there. And all this is just the peelings and stuff from your kitchen. And so what I'll do, after the straw's gone in, I'll basically put a layer of that on to get them going, and then I'm just going to introduce the worms on top of that, and basically just leave them to it from then on in. And then basically, as the worms start to sort of chew down through the sort of the vegetable matter, they'll obviously start to make the liquid fertiliser, and then when it's all finished, what you'll end up with is sort of potting compost, if you like, actually inside the tub. So now I've explained all of that, what I'll do is I'll actually show you me doing it. Okay, so there's the box. As you can see from the inside, that's where the sort of the drain hole. That's where all of the sort of the juices and that from the worms is going to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is place some of this mesh in the bottom of the box, and basically what I'm going to do is, as I put it in, I'm going to make sure that it covers, sort of most importantly, that it covers the the sort of vent there, because obviously that's where the gravel can potentially go. So this first net really is just to stop the gravel from going actually down inside the plumbing and stopping it from working. So I've got 2 tubs of gravel, and there's the gravel there, look. So I'm basically just going to pour that into the bottom. What I need to make sure is that it stays obviously this side of the mesh. And I'm just going to, whilst I've got that there, I'm just going to sort of push that round just to hold the sort of mesh in place. And I'm just going to put the rest of the gravel in from here. And I've got another one outside. This is the second tub going in there. So all I'm going to do now is basically just make sure that all of the gravel's on the right side of the mesh. Like that. Now this gravel, it did come washed, but with gravel, I think it's always a good idea to give it another wash anyway. So I'll just come so you can't hear the weather. So that's the gravel. All I'm doing now is basically just leveling it all off, pushing it up against the inside. So now what I've ended up with is something like 4 or 5 inches of gravel at the bottom of the 4 or 5 inches at the bottom of the box, like that. Okay. Then I'm just going to fold in the rest of the net like that, so it just sort of contains it in. And then I'm going to put on the second mesh. Now this second mesh basically is going to stop the worms from going into the gravel. Now what I have noticed is the worms that I've bought, there is a number of baby worms which are really small. They're like really fine, so you know they can potentially go through this, but there's nothing really I can do with that. So that's the mesh in the bottom. Now what I'm going to do now is just get this wet straw. And what I'm going to do is basically pack all of this inside the box. This is obviously fresh straw, which has been soaking in this trug for about 2 hours. In a little bit, just a bit of warm water, that's all. So I'm just sort of making sure that that's pushed up right up against the edge, because basically what you don't want to do is lose any worms down the side. So what I've ended up with now is probably around probably about 6 inches, possibly slightly less than that, of straw. I'm just going to put a little bit more in there. Just pushing it all down, making sure I've got everything all in there. So basically what I'm making sure is the net is hard against the side, like that, so no worms can sort of escape. Then we've got the obviously the compost. I've got some sort of well, there's all sorts of bits and bobs in here. There's some potato peelings and there's some carrot in that. So that's the first one. And obviously, you know, with your worms, if you can keep the compost as obviously as varied as possible. So you know what you mustn't do is put any kind of protein in here. Don't put any meat or bones or any dairy, you know, any milk or yogurt, cheese, anything like that. Most certainly you don't want to have that in there, but any vegetable matter, literally any vegetable matter, put it in there. What I would suggest you do is avoid putting anything in there that's cooked. So when you do your peelings, you know, when you do your peelings in that, you know, in the kitchen, those are the bits that you need to be saving. There's a few old parsnips there that didn't quite make it into the pot. So that's the compost in there. So there's plenty of compost there. Now I have actually got the tap open on the box. I just wanted any sort of residual water to drain out. Obviously there's the water from the straw, and there's the water from the vegetables and the gravellers. Actually, it's all sort of nice and wet in there. That water you can hear running now is just the water running through the pipe at the bottom. Now, as soon as you've done that, what I would suggest is just make sure there's no sort of path for the worms to go down. Obviously you can't absolutely guarantee that the worms aren't going to find their way out, but obviously you want to try and keep them in within the net as best you can. I did try and think of a way of kind of holding the net up, but I don't think there is one, to be honest with you. I'm just going to tuck that down out of the way. So we're now ready to put the worms in. Now these worms are they're called red brandling worms, and there's two main sorts that are recommended for doing this. The first one is red brandling worms. The second one are called tiger worms, and they're the ones with the stripes on. There's various colours of those. But all I'm going to do now is basically just introduce the worms onto the surface. And I don't know if you can see, but they're all the little baby worms. Can you see the little white? Now obviously what I want to do is try and keep them as best I can. They're obviously the adult worms in there. You can see they're all the sort of the adult worms. So what I'm going to do is just sort of spread them around a little bit. Obviously there's some dirt in there to keep them happy, but what the worms will do now is they'll sort of work their way down into the vegetable matter and start to eat it away. And with sort of red brandling worms, you can see there's this kind of sort of stripy. They're not like normal ground worms. They've got this kind of stripy sort of look about them. Sorry, it's that side you want to look at. You've got like a sort of stripy bit down, and they are quite pretty, to be fair. So because I want these little baby worms here to go into the box, what I'll do for now is just leave this container in there so that they can, I don't think they're going to come out if I do that. No, they're well and truly stuck on there. So what I'll do is I'll just leave the container on there for now, in there, and they'll obviously drop off. I'm not sure if there's any on the lid. No, the lid's free of them. So that's basically building the wormery. Now all I need to do now is basically leave these. Now with a wormery, what you want to do is you want to keep the temperature somewhere around sort of anything above sort of 15 and no more than sort of 25, 30. So what I'm thinking of doing is actually putting this box, rather than keeping it in the greenhouse, what I'm thinking of doing is actually keeping this box in the shed. What I'll do is just keep my eye on it, make sure it doesn't get too dry, and what I'll be doing obviously is adding more adding more vegetables as and when we sort of using them in the kitchen. But because it's quite cool today, obviously the worms are quite lethargic. They're not sort of moving around too much. You can see, if you can see those, there's two little baby worms on my thumb. There's sort of one just there wiggling about. So I'll just knock them in there. But I don't know how many worms there are, but basically these worms came over the internet, and I think they were £8 for supposedly 100 worms. So, but I think with all the babies, there's probably a lot more than that. So basically, all I need to do now is, as I say, I'm going to leave that on there so the babies get out and get into the vegetables. All I need to do now is just put the lid on, and what I'm going to do is attach a bottle on the bottom, because obviously everything that comes off now is is obviously good for fertiliser. So I'm going to connect a bottle onto the bottom of it, and then just put this in a quiet corner in the shed. So in the excitement of getting my worms, I forgot to tell you what you need to do. Obviously I said there was 4 things you needed. I've put a layer of compost underneath the vegetables. So just to reiterate, what we've got is a layer of the net, a layer of gravel, another net, a layer of damp straw, then a very small layer of compost, just basically what you've made in your garden. That's just to basically get them started, and then basically the vegetable matter. Now, things like sort of large pieces of potato like this aren't going to be much good. I was just basically chucking in what I got in my bucket last night. So basically, what you need to do is make sure all of the pieces are reasonably small. I mean, things like things like that will be okay. But obviously, the bigger they are, the longer it'll take them to rot down and for the worms to sort of start to get in there. So what you can do is just get a knife and just chop them up into smaller pieces, and they'll be perfectly okay. So that's the wormery. One final thing. What you need to do is obviously I've got all of the bits and bobs there. You can see the little baby worms in there as well. What I always do as well is just put a piece of newspaper over the top, and what this does is 2 things. One, it keeps the sort of moisture in, and it also keeps the warmth in If there's a little cold snap, it'll just keep the worm in. So that's basically the layers. So net, gravel, net, straw, a little bit of compost, only about 1 inch or so. That's just for the worms to sort of, sort of keep the worms happy. Then obviously you've got your vegetable matter, etc. on there, and then just a piece of newspaper over the top just to keep it moist and basically to keep the warmth in. So then what you can actually put into your wormery, believe it or not, some of the best things you can put in there are things like cooked rice and anything like that. I would tend to avoid putting cooked things in there. Sort of predominantly what you're going to do is put in your potato peelings, your carrot peelings, vegetable peelings and stuff like that. And any sort of vegetable or fruit that you put in there will obviously help. Try to avoid putting any acidic sort of fruit in there, things like oranges, lemons, something sort of kiwi fruits. Try to avoid putting them in there. Obviously, the other things that you could put in there are anything that you've had in your garden that have sort of gone over. Things like flowers, sort of flowers that have gone over. Any sort of foliage. But if you do put leaves in there, don't put too many sort of hard leaves in there. When I say hard leaves, I'm not talking about sort of the soft leaves, things like brassicas and anything like that. I'm talking about sort of leaves off trees and stuff like that. You don't want to put too many of those in there. You can put a handful in, but don't put too many in. Obviously, sort of softer leaves, things like things that are going to decompose quickly, like, I don't know, comfrey, herbs, anything like that. You can put in there. So that's basically what you need to do. Really, the only thing that I'd put in there that's cooked is rice. What you can also put in there is any cereals. Any sort of breakfast cereals or anything like that that you've got for some reason. Don't put any dairy in there, so if you've had milk on them, don't put that in there, because the milk will, you want to avoid putting protein in there, and sort of calcium and stuff like that. So no dairy, no meat obviously, but any kind of cereals, anything that that'll sort of decompose and the worms can get in there. Obviously things like eggshells as well you can put in there, but I wouldn't put too many in there, to be honest with you. I tend not to put eggshells in, but obviously what the worms will do is break all that down inside the wormery, and obviously you're going to get your liquid feed out of it anyway. But after kind of 6 months or so, this is basically going to be full, apart from the gravel bit at the bottom. It's going to be full of really rich, really good sort of compost, which is basically all the worm drills and all the rest of it. And it's really ideal. You can't buy stuff this good in the shops. So if you're potting up any sort of plants or anything like that, the sort of the compost that these worms are going to create is literally gold dust. So the one thing you can do obviously is you can enlarge on what I've done here. Obviously I've just made a small one here. What you can do is obviously use any kind of container. You can go up to the size of a a dustbin, or even big. If you can get those big containers, as long as you can keep it warm in there, for the worms to sort of do their thing. Any sort of size is going to be okay. Obviously I've kept mine reasonably small, but a lot of the wormeries that you buy over the internet are basically like sort of dustbin size. And it acts in exactly the same way. You just put a layer of gravel, a layer of wet straw, and sort of mesh and all the rest of it. And so the actual method is exactly the same. I've just done it slightly smaller here. But so do try it, because you're getting something for nothing at the end of the day. So it's all good. You're going to get your liquid fertiliser, which is fantastic for pretty much any crop. I'm going to be using it in the sort of the greenhouse, and sort of outside as well to water stuff. You basically water it down about 10 to 1, exactly like you would do with comfrey tea. So water it down about 10 to 1, and sort of water that sort of 2 or 3 times a week during the really sort of high sort of growing period. And I'll show you. I'll go and get some worm juice that I made last year, so you can actually see what it looks like if you've never seen it before. But it looks kind of like dark tea without any milk in it, sort of thing. So that's all about wormeries. Okay, so there's the liquid that you get from a wormery, and it's like a sort of dark, sort of greeny, sort of, I don't know, like a tea sort of thing. And as I say, you water this down sort of 10 to 1 in a watering can. Water it on wherever you need to fertilise. Now this will effectively last for a year or so, I would say. The longer you leave it, the less good it is. So obviously this is almost 12 months old now. Well, perhaps not 12 months, but it's, you know, it's going on for that. So really what I'll do is probably water this probably 5 to 1 and just sort of put it around the garden to, you know, just to empty the bottles. But what you can do, you know, the point I wanted to make was what you can do is sort of empty your sort of wormery into bottles like this, and I'll just store this in a dark, it's actually just to the side of that fence behind me, to be honest with you. I'll just store it down there. You know, I have a number of these bottles along, and I'll just store it there. Then as I need to use it, I'll just pour it out and use it. So but what I would suggest is, if you are going to store it and not use it straight away, put it in a dark place. Don't let it get in direct sunlight, because that will most certainly affect it. And just keep it in a dark place, somewhere cool, not too hot. And as I say, you know, just use it through the year as that. So, you know, you can store it, but I would say most certainly try to use it within 6 months or so of actually, you know, taking it from the worms. Ideally, use it straight out the thing. You know, it's always best straight out of the worm and get it straight on your plant. And typically during the summer, that's what I do. It's only towards the back end of the year, when I've not got that much stuff growing, that's when I kind of save it into the bottles. So, thank you for watching Jim's Allotment Garden. I do appreciate all of the comments and questions that you've left, and I do also appreciate some of the hints and tips that people are leaving on the channel as well. I've actually used some today in the peas and stuff like that, so really do appreciate all of the feedback, and I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Allotment Garden.